What would you do if your husband handed you divorce papers the morning after you thought you'd gotten away with everything? How could one night, one innocent walk home, unravel your marriage, your family, and your reputation? This is the story of how I thought I could outsmart everyone, and what happened next when my husband outsmarted me. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The wine bar buzzed with Friday night energy as I settled into the plush velvet booth, finally feeling alive for the first time in weeks. The dim lighting cast a warm glow over everything, making the whole place feel like an escape from my mundane reality at home. My sister Fiona raised her glass of Pinot Grigio with a mischievous grin. "To Isolde finally getting out of that house," she declared, her voice carrying over the soft jazz music. I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. "God, you make it sound like I'm a prisoner or something." "Aren't you, though?" Fiona's eyes sparkled with mischief. "When's the last time you did something just for you? When's the last time Daniel took you somewhere this nice?" I couldn't answer that question, and we both knew it. Daniel, my husband of 9 years, was many things: reliable, responsible, good with the kids, but spontaneous wasn't one of them. Neither was romantic, if I'm being honest. Our idea of a date night was ordering takeout after the kids went to bed and watching Netflix until one of us fell asleep on the couch. "He's not that bad," I said half-heartedly, taking a sip of wine. "Isolde, honey, you're 34 years old. You work your ass off at that HR job. You take care of Lily and Ben. You keep that house running like clockwork. What does Daniel do? He goes to his little high school, teaches his math classes, comes home, grades papers, and goes to bed. Where's the excitement? Where's the passion?" I wanted to defend him, but the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, Fiona was right. I felt invisible in my own marriage, like I was just another item on Daniel's to-do list, somewhere between pick up dry cleaning and fix the leaky faucet. My phone buzzed against the table. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. "How's the work dinner going? When will you be home?" I stared at the message, feeling a familiar knot of irritation in my stomach. I'd told him I had a mandatory work dinner tonight, a little white lie that had rolled off my tongue so easily, I almost believed it myself. But seeing his text now, I felt trapped, like he was checking up on me. "Let me guess," Fiona said, noticing my expression. "Daniel?" I nodded, setting the phone face down without responding. "You don't have to answer him, you know. You're a grown woman having dinner with her sister. It's not a crime." But I could feel the phone burning against the table, knowing Daniel was probably sitting in our living room, waiting for my response while helping Ben with his homework or reading to Lily. The guilt started creeping in, but Fiona ordered another round before I could dwell on it. That's when I noticed him, the bartender with the easy smile and the way too charming dimples. He was probably 5 years younger than me, with that effortless cool that Daniel had never possessed. When he brought our drinks over personally, instead of having the server deliver them, I felt a little thrill I hadn't experienced in years. "Ladies, you look like you're celebrating something special tonight," he said, his voice smooth as whiskey. "My sister's jailbreak," Fiona announced with a giggle. He laughed, and I felt my cheeks flush. "I'm Travis, by the way. And you are?" "Isolde," I said, surprised by how breathless I sounded. Beautiful name for a beautiful woman. The line was cheesy, but coming from him, it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded genuine, like he really meant it. My phone buzzed again, another text from Daniel. "Kids are asking when Mummy's coming home. Should I tell them you'll be back for bedtime stories?" This time, the irritation flared into something closer to anger. Here I was, finally having a good time, finally feeling attractive and interesting, and Daniel was guilt-tripping me about bedtime stories. I'd read to the kids every night this week. One night off shouldn't be the end of the world. I typed back quickly, "Work dinner running late. Tell them I love them, and I'll make it up tomorrow." It wasn't entirely a lie. I did love my children, and I would make it up to them. But right now, I needed this. I needed to feel like Isolde the woman, not just Isolde the mother and wife. Travis had moved on to other customers, but he kept catching my eye from across the bar, that smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When he came back to check on us an hour later, Fiona excused herself to the bathroom with a knowing wink. "So, Isolde," Travis said, leaning against our table with casual confidence, "what do you do when you're not breaking out of jail?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "I'm in HR, not nearly as exciting as it sounds." "I don't know about that. You seem pretty exciting to me." The compliment hit me like a warm wave. When was the last time Daniel had called me exciting? When was the last time he'd looked at me the way Travis was looking at me right now, like I was the most interesting person in the room? "What about you?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. "Bartending and music mostly. I play guitar in a band. We're not famous or anything, but we're working on it." He grinned sheepishly. I know. Every bartender in America has a band." "I think it's amazing," I said, and I meant it. Following your passion, not just settling for routine. Something in my voice must have given me away because his expression softened. "Rough patch at home?" I should have deflected, should have changed the subject or made some joke about marriage being work. Instead, I found myself nodding. "Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing," I admitted. "Like I'm just going through the motions of being a wife and mother, but nobody really sees me anymore." Travis reached across the table and touched my hand gently. "I see you." Those 3 words hit me harder than they should have. I see you. When was the last time I'd felt truly seen? My phone rang this time, Daniel's name flashing insistently. I rejected the call and turned the phone face down. "You don't have to answer that," Travis said softly. "I know." But even as I said it, I could feel the familiar weight of obligation settling on my shoulders. Fiona returned from the bathroom, her timing impeccable as always. She took one look at Travis's hand still covering mine and raised an eyebrow. Well, she said with a grin. "What did I miss?" Travis pulled his hand back, but not before giving mine a gentle squeeze. "Just getting to know your sister better. She's pretty incredible." I felt myself blushing again, like a teenager with her first crush. It was ridiculous, but God, it felt good. The evening flew by in a haze of wine, laughter, and Travis's undivided attention. Every time he had a break from the bar, he found his way back to our table. He told me about his music, his dreams of making it big, his philosophy about living life to the fullest. I found myself sharing things I hadn't talked about in years. My college dreams of traveling, my secret love of poetry, my frustration with feeling stuck in suburban monotony. "You know what your problem is," Travis said as last call approached. "You've forgotten who you are outside of being a wife and mother. But she's still in there. I can see her." His words resonated deep in my chest. He was right. I had forgotten who Isolde was before she became Mrs. Daniel Merrick, before she became Lily and Ben's mum, before she became just another face in the HR department. "I should probably head home," I said reluctantly as the bar began to empty. "Let me walk you," Travis offered immediately. "It's late, and a beautiful woman shouldn't be walking alone at night." Fiona, who had been unusually quiet for the last hour, suddenly perked up. "That's so sweet of you, Travis. Isolde, you should totally let him walk you home." I hesitated for a moment, thinking about Daniel waiting at home, probably pacing the kitchen and checking his phone every 5 minutes. But then I looked at Travis's hopeful expression and felt that rebellious spark flare to life again. "Okay," I said. "That would be nice." As we left the bar together, Travis's hand hovering protectively at the small of my back, I felt more alive than I had in years. The night air was crisp and full of possibilities. For once in my life, I was doing something spontaneous, something just for me. I had no idea that someone was watching from a parked car across the street, or that this one decision would change everything. The cool October air felt refreshing after the warmth of the crowded bar. Travis walked beside me with an easy confidence that I found intoxicating. Everything about him was so different from Daniel. The way he moved with fluid grace instead of Daniel's careful, measured steps. The way he gestured animatedly when he talked instead of Daniel's reserved mannerisms. "So, tell me about this band of yours," I said, pulling my jacket tighter as we strolled down the tree-lined street toward my neighborhood. "We're called Midnight Revival," Travis said, his eyes lighting up. I know. It sounds like every other indie rock band, but the music is what matters. We play this mix of alternative rock with some folk influences. Very emotional, very raw." "That sounds amazing. Daniel, my husband, he doesn't really get music. He thinks anything that isn't classical or educational is just noise." Travis stopped walking and turned to face me. "Seriously? Man, that's rough. Music is like, it's the language of the soul, you know? How can someone not get that?" I shrugged, feeling disloyal for criticizing Daniel but unable to stop myself. He's very practical. Everything has to serve a purpose. Art for art's sake doesn't compute for him. "What about you? What kind of music moves you?" The question caught me off guard. I couldn't remember the last time someone had asked me about my preferences, my tastes, my desires. "I used to love everything," I said slowly. "Rock, pop, country, jazz. I had this huge CD collection in college, but somewhere along the way I just stopped listening." "That's criminal," Travis said with mock seriousness. "We need to fix that immediately." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his music library. "Here, listen to this. It's one of our original songs." He handed me one earbud while keeping the other, and suddenly, we were standing intimately close on the sidewalk, sharing his music. The song was beautiful, haunting and melodic, with lyrics about feeling lost and finding yourself again. I could hear Travis's voice harmonizing with the lead singer, and it sent shivers down my spine. "You wrote this?" I asked when it ended. "The music, yeah. Jake, our lead singer, wrote most of the lyrics, but this line here..." He rewound to a specific part. "She's forgotten how to fly, but her wings remember. That's mine." The words hit me like a physical blow. That's beautiful." "It's about women like you," he said softly. "Women who've lost themselves but still have all that fire inside, waiting to be rekindled." My phone started buzzing insistently in my purse. I knew without looking that it was Daniel, probably wondering why I wasn't home yet, probably calculating how long a work dinner should reasonably take. The buzzing felt accusatory, demanding, and suddenly I was furious. "Aren't you going to answer that?" Travis asked, noticing my tension. "No," I said firmly, reaching into my purse and silencing the phone without even looking at it. "I'm tired of being on call 24/7. I'm allowed to have a life." Travis nodded approvingly. "Good for you. You can't live your whole life for other people, Isolde. At some point, you have to choose yourself." We continued walking, the conversation flowing easily between us. Travis told me about growing up in a small town in Ohio, about his dreams of making it in music, about his philosophy that life was too short to settle for anything less than passion. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't in years, telling him about my college dreams of being a writer, about the poetry I used to write, about feeling trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt hollow on the inside. "You know what I think?" Travis said as we turned onto my street. "I think you're at a crossroads. You can keep sleepwalking through your life, or you can wake up and start living again." "It's not that simple," I protested. "I have kids, responsibilities." "I'm not saying abandon your kids," Travis said quickly. "I'm saying remember that you're more than just their mother. You're Isolde. You're this incredible, complex, beautiful woman who deserves to feel alive." We had reached the corner of my street, and I could see my house in the distance, the porch light Daniel always left on for me, the minivan in the driveway, the basketball hoop where Ben practiced his shots every afternoon. My real life, waiting for me like a patient, loyal dog. I should probably, I started, but Travis gently touched my arm. "Don't go back to sleepwalking," he said urgently. "Promise me that, whatever happens, don't forget what it feels like to be awake." I looked up at him, this beautiful, passionate man who saw something in me that I'd thought was dead and buried. In the soft glow of the streetlight, he looked like something out of a dream. Too good to be real, too perfect to last. "I won't forget," I whispered. He stepped closer, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me. Part of me wanted him to. Part of me wanted to throw caution to the wind and feel something real and electric and dangerous. But he just reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. "Can I see you again?" he asked. I should have said no, should have thanked him for a lovely evening and walked away. Should have remembered my wedding vows, my children sleeping peacefully in their beds, my husband waiting up for me with worried eyes. Instead, I heard myself saying, "I'd like that." Travis smiled, that devastating smile that made my knees weak. "Good, I'll find you." He pulled me into a hug then, and I melted into his arms, breathing in his scent, cologne mixed with something distinctly masculine and alive. The hug lasted longer than it should have, and when we finally pulled apart, I felt bereft. "Good night, beautiful Isolde," he said softly. "Good night, Travis." I watched him walk away, his hands in his pockets, whistling softly. Only when he turned the corner and disappeared from sight did I start walking toward my house, each step feeling heavier than the last. The house was dark, except for the porch light and a faint glow from the living room window. As I fumbled with my keys, I tried to prepare myself for Daniel's inevitable questions. Where had I been? Why hadn't I answered his calls? Why did I smell like wine and cologne? I slipped inside as quietly as possible, hoping Daniel had given up waiting and gone to bed. But as I closed the front door behind me and turned toward the stairs, I sensed rather than saw a presence in the living room. "Daniel," I called softly. Silence. I walked toward the living room, my heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. The room was dark, but I could make out a figure sitting in Daniel's favorite armchair, perfectly still, perfectly silent. "Daniel, you scared me," I said, reaching for the light switch. "Don't." His voice was quiet, controlled, but there was something in it I'd never heard before. Something that made my blood run cold. "What are you doing sitting in the dark?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Thinking," he said simply. "About what?" A long pause. Then, "About my wife who told me she was at a mandatory work dinner, but has been posting pictures on Instagram all night at Murphy's Wine Bar with her sister and some guy I've never seen before." My heart stopped. I'd forgotten about Fiona's social media habits, her compulsive need to document every moment of our lives. "Daniel, I can explain. Can you?" He still hadn't moved from the chair. "Because I'm really curious to hear how a work dinner turned into drinks with a strange man. I'm curious to hear why you ignored my calls and texts for 3 hours. I'm curious to hear why you're just now coming home at 1:30 in the morning." I stood there in the darkness, feeling exposed and guilty and angry all at once. "I don't owe you a minute-by-minute account of my evening, Daniel. I'm allowed to have friends. I'm allowed to have fun." "Friends," he repeated slowly. "Is that what we're calling him?" "His name is Travis, and yes, he's a friend. Fiona and I met him at the bar, and he was nice enough to walk me home because it's late and dangerous for a woman to walk alone. I would think my husband would appreciate that someone was looking out for my safety." Daniel finally stood up, and I could see his silhouette against the window. He looked taller somehow, more imposing than usual. "Your safety," he said. "Right, that's what this was about." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know you, Isolde. I know when you're lying, and right now, you're lying through your teeth." The accusation hit me like a slap. "How dare you?" "How dare I what? How dare I notice that my wife has been distant and cold for months? How dare I notice that she's been looking for excuses to get out of the house? How dare I notice that she comes home smelling like another man's cologne?" I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words died in my throat. Because he was right. I could smell Travis on my jacket, could still feel the warmth of his arms around me. "Nothing happened, Daniel," I said quietly. "This time," he replied. The two words hung in the air between us like a challenge. This time, as if he knew there would be a next time, as if he could see right through me to the part of my heart that was already planning when I might see Travis again. "I'm going to bed," I said, suddenly exhausted. "Isolde." Daniel's voice stopped me at the bottom of the stairs. "I love you, I love our family, but I won't be made a fool of. Whatever this is, whatever you think you're doing, it stops now." I climbed the stairs without responding, but his words followed me into our bedroom, where I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself that I wasn't already planning my next escape. I woke up to the sound of Daniel's alarm at 6:30, my head pounding from too much wine and too little sleep. Daniel was already sitting on the edge of the bed, pulling on his socks with methodical precision, his back rigid with tension. "Morning," I mumbled, hoping we could pretend last night's confrontation had been a bad dream. He didn't respond, just stood up and walked to his dresser to select a tie. The silence felt thick and accusatory, making my hangover worse. I dragged myself to the shower, letting the hot water wash away the remnants of last night, the smell of Travis's cologne, the wine on my breath, the guilty flush in my cheeks. By the time I made it downstairs to the kitchen, Daniel was already making breakfast for the kids, his movements sharp and efficient. Lily and Ben were at the kitchen table in their pajamas, Ben working on a coloring book, while Lily practiced writing her spelling words. They looked up when I entered, and I forced a bright smile. "Good morning, my babies," I said, kissing the top of each of their heads. "Sorry Mommy missed bedtime stories last night. Work ran really late." "Daddy said you were at an important dinner," Lily said, looking at me with her serious 8-year-old eyes. "But you look tired." "I am tired, sweetie, but I'm here now." Daniel set plates of scrambled eggs and toast in front of the kids without looking at me. The domestic routine felt surreal after the intensity of last night, like we were actors playing our roles in a family drama. "Coffee?" Daniel asked curtly, already pouring himself a cup. "Please," I said, settling into my usual chair at the breakfast table. He set a mug in front of me with more force than necessary, the coffee sloshing slightly, still avoiding eye contact. "So," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "how was your work dinner?" I felt both kids' attention shift to me, their little faces expectant. This was the moment to come clean, to admit I'd lied and apologize. Instead, I heard myself doubling down. "Oh, you know how these things are. Boring presentations, networking, the usual corporate nonsense. But it's important for my career advancement, so—" "Right," Daniel said, his tone flat. "Career advancement. At Murphy's Wine Bar." My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression neutral. "I don't know what you mean." "Daddy, what's Murphy's Wine Bar?" Ben asked innocently. "It's a place where grown-ups go to drink wine and lie to their families," Daniel said, his eyes finally meeting mine across the table. "Daniel," I hissed, glancing meaningfully at the children. "What? I thought we were sharing interesting facts about local establishments." Lily looked confused, her pencil hovering over her spelling worksheet. "Mummy, why would grown-ups lie to their families?" "They wouldn't, sweetheart," I said quickly. "Daddy's just being silly." "Am I?" Daniel asked, setting down his coffee mug with deliberate precision. "Because I'm pretty sure lying is when you tell someone one thing but do something completely different. Like saying you're at a work dinner when you're actually at a bar with your sister and some random guy." "Daniel, please, not in front of the kids." "Oh, now you're concerned about the kids. Were you concerned about them when you were ignoring my calls last night? When you were letting some stranger walk you home at 1:30 in the morning?" Ben started to cry, overwhelmed by the tension crackling between his parents. Lily put her arm around him protectively, her face pale and frightened. "Look what you've done," I snapped, scooping Ben into my arms. "You've upset them with your paranoid accusations." "My paranoid accusations?" Daniel's voice rose slightly before he caught himself, glancing at the children. Right, I'm the problem here. He grabbed his coffee mug and stalked out of the kitchen. A moment later, I heard his office door slam shut. I spent the next hour getting the kids ready for school, trying to act normal while my mind raced. How much did Daniel actually know? Had he just seen Fiona's Instagram posts, or was there more? And why did I feel more angry than guilty? I was the one who'd been caught in a lie, but somehow Daniel's cold interrogation made me feel like the victim. After dropping the kids at school, I drove to my office on autopilot, my phone buzzing with texts from Fiona. OMG, last night was so fun. Travis is gorgeous. You better tell me everything. Also, Daniel called me this morning asking questions about last night. I covered for you, but he seemed suspicious. Call me when you get a chance. We need to talk. I deleted the messages without responding and threw myself into work, trying to lose myself in employee evaluations and policy reviews. But I couldn't stop thinking about Travis, his easy smile, the way he'd looked at me like I was fascinating, the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years. Around lunchtime, my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, and I hesitated before answering. Hello? We need to talk, he said without preamble. I'm at work, Daniel. So am I, but apparently that doesn't stop us from having important conversations, does it? The dig stung, but I kept my voice level. What do you want to talk about? I want to know who Travis is. I want to know how long this has been going on. And I want to know if you have any intention of ending it. There's nothing to end, I said, glancing around to make sure my office door was closed. He's just a friend, Daniel. You're making this into something it's not. Am I? Because friends don't usually walk each other home at 1:30 in the morning. Friends don't usually make their spouses lie about where they've been. I didn't lie. You told me you were at a work dinner, Isolde. You told the kids you were at a work dinner. But you were at a bar, drinking wine and flirting with some guy you just met. What would you call that? I was quiet for a long moment, trying to find the right words. I called it a work dinner because I knew you'd react exactly like this. I knew you'd get jealous and paranoid and turn an innocent night out into some kind of betrayal. Innocent, Daniel repeated. Right, so if it was so innocent, why didn't you answer your phone? Why didn't you come home when I asked? Why are you getting defensive instead of apologetic? Because I have nothing to apologize for. The words came out louder than I intended. I went out with my sister. I had a few drinks. I met a nice person who was kind enough to make sure I got home safely. That's it. That's the whole story. And if I asked you to never see him again? The question hung in the air like a trap. Because the honest answer was that I didn't want to never see Travis again. I wanted to see him tonight, tomorrow, every day, until that spark I'd felt last night grew into something real and transformative. That would be controlling and unreasonable, I said finally. I see. Daniel's voice was quiet, resigned. So, my comfort, my trust, my feelings about my wife spending time with another man, none of that matters to you. Of course it matters, but not enough to stop. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone and feeling more confused than ever. Was I wrong? Was I being selfish and unfair? Or was Daniel being possessive and controlling, trying to keep me trapped in our boring, passionless marriage? I called Fiona during my lunch break, needing someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. Girl, you are not the problem here, she said immediately after I'd filled her in on the morning's drama. Daniel is being totally unreasonable. You're allowed to have friends. You're allowed to have fun. Just because you're married doesn't mean you're dead. But maybe I should have told him the truth from the beginning, I said, pacing around the empty conference room I'd ducked into for privacy. Why? So he could forbid you from going out. So he could make you feel guilty for having a good time. Isolde, you've been miserable for months. Last night was the first time I've seen you smile. Really smile, in forever. Don't let Daniel take that away from you. He thinks something's going on between me and Travis. Is there? I hesitated. No, I mean, not really. We just talked. He walked me home. That's it. But you like him? Another hesitation. He's interesting. He makes me feel interesting. Then there's your answer. Daniel makes you feel like a boring housewife. Travis makes you feel like a fascinating woman. Which version of yourself do you want to be? After we hung up, I sat in the empty conference room for a long time, staring out the window at the parking lot below. Fiona was right. I had been miserable. I had felt invisible, unappreciated, taken for granted. Travis had reminded me that I was still attractive, still worth pursuing, still capable of inspiring passion in someone. Was it so wrong to want to feel that way again? When I got home that evening, Daniel's car wasn't in the driveway. I found a note on the kitchen counter. Took kids to my mother's for dinner, home late, leftovers in fridge. The house felt empty and accusatory without them. I wandered from room to room, seeing everything with new eyes. The family photos that no longer included candid moments of joy. The living room, where Daniel and I sat in separate chairs watching TV in silence. The bedroom where we slept on opposite sides of the bed like polite strangers. When had we stopped being happy? When had we stopped being us? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hey beautiful, it's Travis. Got your number from Fiona. Hope that's okay. Can't stop thinking about last night. I stared at the message, my heart racing. I should delete it. Should block his number. Should focus on fixing my marriage instead of fantasizing about escaping it. Instead, I typed back, "Hi. Last night was really nice." His response came immediately. "Want to do it again?" "I'm playing at the Bluebird Cafe tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just me and my guitar. Would love to see you there." I looked around my empty house, thinking about Daniel's cold silence, the kids' frightened faces at breakfast, the way my husband looked at me now, like I was a stranger he couldn't trust. "I'd love to," I typed, then hit send before I could change my mind. I didn't know it yet, but Daniel had already removed his wedding ring and left it on his dresser upstairs. I didn't know that he'd spent his lunch break consulting with a divorce attorney. I didn't know that he'd already started documenting everything. My lies, my behavior, my betrayal of our family. All I knew was that for the first time in years, I had something to look forward to. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Daniel's mother, Evelyn, stood on my doorstep at 8:15, her silver hair perfectly styled and her expression uncharacteristically stern. "Evelyn," I said, forcing a smile as I opened the door. "What a nice surprise. Come in." "We need to talk, Isolde," she said, stepping into the foyer without her usual warmth. My stomach dropped. Evelyn had always liked me, had always treated me like the daughter she'd never had. But there was something different in her demeanor today, something cold and disappointed. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered, leading her toward the kitchen. "This isn't a social call." She sat down at the kitchen table, her purse clutched tightly in her lap. "Daniel called me last night. He's very upset." "I'm sure he told you his version of events," I said carefully. "He told me that you lied to him about where you were Friday night. He told me you were out drinking with some strange man while your children were home wondering where their mother was." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "That's not... It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Isolde? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're having some kind of midlife crisis and you're willing to destroy your family to indulge it." "I went out with my sister," I said, my voice rising defensively. "I had a few drinks. I met someone nice, and he walked me home. That's it. Daniel is blowing this completely out of proportion." Evelyn studied me with those sharp blue eyes that Daniel had inherited. "Are you planning to see this man again?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about Travis's text, about the concert tonight, about the way my heart had raced when I'd agreed to meet him there. "We're friends," I said weakly. "That's not what I asked." I looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "I don't know. Maybe." Evelyn sighed heavily. "Isolde, I've known you for 10 years. I watched you and Daniel fall in love. I watched you build a beautiful life together. I've seen you with Lily and Ben, seen what a wonderful mother you are. What's happened to you?" "Nothing's happened to me," I snapped. "Maybe I'm just tired of being taken for granted. Maybe I'm tired of feeling invisible in my own marriage." "So instead of talking to your husband, instead of working on your problems together, you decide to run around town with another man. How is that supposed to fix anything?" "It's not about fixing anything. It's about remembering who I am outside of being Daniel's wife and the kid's mother." Evelyn shook her head sadly. "You're making a terrible mistake, Isolde. Daniel loves you. Those children adore you. Don't throw it all away for some fantasy." After she left, I called in sick to work and spent the day cleaning the house with aggressive intensity, trying to scrub away the guilt and confusion that seemed to cling to everything. But no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't shake Evelyn's words or the look of disappointment in her eyes. By evening, I'd almost convinced myself not to go to Travis's concert. Almost. But as I stood in front of my closet, looking at my collection of sensible work clothes and mom-appropriate casual wear, I felt that familiar suffocation creeping in. When had I stopped dressing for myself? When had I stopped caring about being attractive? I chose a black dress I hadn't worn in 2 years. Nothing too revealing, but fitted and feminine in a way that made me feel like a woman instead of just a wife and mother. I told Daniel I was meeting Fiona for dinner, another lie that rolled off my tongue with disturbing ease. The Bluebird Cafe was intimate and dimly lit, with small tables clustered around a tiny stage. I arrived early and claimed a table near the back, nursing a glass of wine and watching the room fill with an eclectic crowd of music lovers and 20-somethings. When Travis took the stage with his guitar, I felt that same electric thrill I'd experienced Friday night. He looked different under the stage lights, more serious, more artistic, more real somehow. When he started to play, his voice was rich and soulful, filling the small space with emotion. Halfway through his set, his eyes found mine in the crowd. He smiled, and I felt like the only person in the room. When he introduced his next song, he said, "This one's for a beautiful woman who's just remembering how to fly." I recognized the melody immediately. It was the song he'd played for me on the street, the one with the lyrics about forgotten wings. As he sang, his eyes kept finding mine, and I felt exposed and exhilarated at the same time. After his set, Travis made his way through the crowd to my table, guitar case slung over his shoulder. "You came," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You're incredibly talented," I said, meaning it completely. "Did you like the song I wrote for you?" "You wrote that for me. Inspired by you anyway. You've got me thinking about wings and flying and all sorts of poetic nonsense." He grinned that devastating smile. "Want to get out of here? I know a place." I should have said no, should have thanked him for a lovely evening and gone home to my family. Instead, I found myself nodding, following him out into the night like a moth drawn to flame. The place turned out to be a 24-hour diner with cracked vinyl booths and fluorescent lighting that should have been romantic suicide. But somehow, sitting across from Travis in that tacky little restaurant, sharing pie and talking about music and dreams and the meaning of life, felt more intimate than any fancy dinner Daniel had ever taken me to. "Tell me about your husband," Travis said suddenly, catching me off guard. "What about him? What's he like? What made you fall in love with him?" I opened my mouth to give the standard answer. Daniel was stable, reliable, a good father, a good provider. But as I tried to form the words, I realized I couldn't remember what had made me fall in love with him. Had there ever been passion? Had there ever been the kind of electric connection I felt with Travis? "He's safe," I said finally. Travis raised an eyebrow. "Safe?" "Predictable, comfortable. He's never surprised me, never challenged me, never made me question anything about myself or my life." "And that's what you wanted?" "I thought it was. When I was 25 and tired of dating musicians and artists and guys who were always chasing some impossible dream, Daniel seemed like the answer. He had a plan, a career, a vision of the future that included marriage and kids and a house in the suburbs. It seemed grown up. And now I feel like I'm suffocating. Travis reached across the table and took my hand. So stop suffocating. Choose to breathe. We talked until 3 in the morning, and when Travis walked me to my car, I didn't want the night to end. This time, when he pulled me into his arms, I didn't pull away. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but when I responded, it deepened into something hungry and desperate and completely intoxicating. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless and dizzy and more alive than I'd felt in years. I should go, I whispered, but I made no move to leave his arms. I know, he said, but he didn't let me go either. This is crazy. The best things usually are. I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling from his kiss, my heart racing with possibility and terror in equal measure. I'd crossed a line tonight and there was no going back. Daniel was waiting for me in the kitchen when I crept through the front door at 3:30. He was sitting at the table with his laptop open, and when he looked up at me, his expression was unreadable. "How was dinner with Fiona?" he asked quietly. "Fine," I said, avoiding his eyes. "Why are you still up?" "Couldn't sleep." He closed the laptop and stood up. "Isolde, I know where you were tonight." My blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" "Jennifer Morrison was at the Bluebird Cafe tonight. She saw you there with him. She saw you leave together." Jennifer Morrison, whose son was in Ben's kindergarten class. Jennifer Morrison, who volunteered at the school fundraisers and organized the neighborhood book club. Jennifer Morrison, who would tell everyone she knew about what she'd seen. "It's not what you think," I started, but Daniel held up a hand to stop me. "I don't want to hear it, Isolde. I don't want to hear any more lies." His voice was calm, controlled, but I could see the pain in his eyes. "I've made an appointment with a marriage counselor for Friday. We're going to try to fix this, for the kids' sake. But if you're not willing to end whatever this is with Travis, if you're not willing to fight for our marriage, then we need to start talking about other options." Other options? Separation, divorce, custody arrangements. Each word hit me like a physical blow. "I won't be humiliated anymore, Isolde. I won't let you destroy our family for some fantasy romance with a bartender." He walked past me toward the stairs, then paused at the bottom step. "Oh, and Isolde, Jennifer wasn't the only one who saw you tonight. By tomorrow, everyone we know will know exactly what kind of wife and mother you really are." As I stood alone in my kitchen at 4 in the morning, still tasting Travis's kiss on my lips, I realized that my secret was out, and I had no idea how much worse things were about to get. The next few days passed in a blur of whispered conversations and averted eyes. At Lily's soccer practice, the other mothers clustered together, their voices dropping to hushed tones when I approached. At the grocery store, I ran into Sarah Chen, whose daughter was in Lily's class, and watched her face go carefully neutral when she saw me. "Oh, hi Isolde," Sarah said, her smile strained. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine," I replied, though we both knew it was a lie. "Good, good. Well, I should get going. Tell Daniel I said hello." The emphasis on Daniel's name wasn't lost on me. The message was clear. People were taking sides, and they weren't taking mine. I tried to convince myself I didn't care what a bunch of suburban gossips thought about my life. But when Lily came home from school on Wednesday, asking why Madison's mum had told Madison she couldn't come to our house for playdates anymore, I felt the first real stab of regret. "Did I do something wrong, Mommy?" Lily asked, her 8-year-old face creased with worry. "No, baby," I said, pulling her into my arms. "You didn't do anything wrong. Some grown-ups are just complicated." But even as I comforted my daughter, I could feel the walls closing in. Daniel had been coldly polite since Monday night, speaking to me only when necessary, and sleeping in the guest room. The kids sensed the tension and had become clingy and anxious, with Ben having nightmares and Lily acting out at school. I should have ended things with Travis, Should have focused on damage control and saving my marriage. Instead, I found myself texting him constantly, craving the validation and excitement he provided. When he suggested we meet for lunch on Thursday, I agreed without hesitation. We met at a small cafe across town, away from my usual haunts. Travis was waiting for me in a corner booth, and when he saw me, his face lit up with that smile that made my knees weak. "You look stressed," he said, standing to kiss my cheek. "It's been a difficult week," I admitted, sliding into the booth across from him. "Because of the other night?" I nodded, suddenly feeling close to tears. People saw us together. Now everyone's talking, and Daniel's threatening divorce, and my kids are suffering because their mother is apparently the neighborhood pariah. Travis reached across the table and took my hands. "Hey, look at me. You haven't done anything wrong. You're a grown woman who went to hear some music and had dinner with a friend. If people want to make something ugly out of that, that's their problem, not yours. But my kids. Your kids deserve a mother who's happy and fulfilled, not one who's dying inside from living a lie. Isolde, you can't sacrifice your entire life to maintain some perfect suburban facade." His words made sense, but they didn't ease the knot of guilt in my stomach. Maybe I should just go back to the way things were. Try to make my marriage work. Travis's expression grew serious. "Is that what you want? To go back to being invisible? To spend the rest of your life pretending to be someone you're not?" "I don't know what I want anymore," I admitted. "Yes, you do." He squeezed my hands. "You want to feel alive. You want to matter. You want someone to see the real you and love what they see." Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. "But what about my children? What about my family? What about your happiness? What about your dreams? Isolde, you get one life, one chance to be who you're meant to be. Don't waste it trying to be who everyone else thinks you should be." We talked for 2 hours, and by the time I left the cafe, I felt centered again, reminded of why I'd been drawn to Travis in the first place. He saw me, really saw me, in a way Daniel never had. I was so caught up in my thoughts that I didn't notice Daniel's car in the school parking lot when I picked up the kids. Didn't notice him watching from across the street as I loaded Lily and Ben into my van. Didn't realize he'd taken a half day off work to follow me, to see for himself where I'd been spending my afternoons. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Daniel knocked on my office door where I was pretending to work on my laptop. "We need to talk," he said, his voice eerily calm. "About what?" He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. In his hand was a manila folder, thick with papers. "About the fact that you lied to me again today. About the fact that while I was at work trying to support our family, you were having lunch with your boyfriend. He's not my—" "Stop." Daniel's voice cut through my protest like a blade. "Just stop lying, Isolde. I'm done with the lies." He opened the folder and pulled out a photograph, me and Travis at the cafe, leaning across the table toward each other, his hands covering mine. My stomach dropped. "Where did you get that?" "I hired a private investigator," Daniel said matter-of-factly. "Turns out you're not as careful as you think you are." He spread more photos across my desk like a dealer laying out cards. Me and Travis at the Bluebird Cafe. Me and Travis kissing in the parking lot. Me and Travis at the diner, looking at each other like lovesick teenagers. "Daniel, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you've been lying to me for weeks? Can you explain why you've been sneaking around behind my back, kissing another man while your children sleep in their beds, thinking their mother is trustworthy?" The photo stared up at me accusingly, evidence of my betrayal laid out in black and white. But instead of shame, I felt a surge of anger. "You had me followed," I demanded. "You hired someone to spy on me?" "I hired someone to find out the truth, since my wife seems incapable of telling it." "That's a violation of my privacy, Daniel. That's what happens when you destroy your family for a fling with a bartender." Daniel's composure finally cracked, his voice rising. "That's what happens when you lie and cheat and humiliate me in front of our entire community." "I haven't cheated. Haven't you?" He pulled out another photo, this one clearly showing Travis and me kissing. What would you call this? I stared at the image, seeing myself as Daniel saw me, a cheating wife, a lying mother, a woman who'd thrown away everything good in her life for a moment of passion. It was just a kiss, I said weakly. Just a kiss. Daniel laughed bitterly. Do you hear yourself, Isolde? Do you hear how pathetic that sounds? You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I understand that my wife is having an affair. I understand that she's been lying to me and our children. I understand that she cares more about some stranger's attention than she does about her own family. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you looked at me the way you look at him in these photos? When's the last time you touched me the way you're touching him here? He was right, and we both knew it. I couldn't remember the last time I'd looked at Daniel with desire, the last time I'd been excited to see him, the last time I'd felt my heart race when he walked into a room. I want you to end it, Daniel said quietly. I want you to call him right now and tell him it's over. I want you to block his number, delete his contact information, and never see him again. And if I don't, Daniel's expression hardened, then I file for divorce tomorrow morning. And I use these photos to make sure I get primary custody of our children. The threat hit me like a physical blow. You wouldn't. Try me, Isolde. I've spent 10 years being the stable, reliable, boring husband you settled for. But I won't spend another day being the fool you cheat on. He gathered up the photos and put them back in the folder. You have until tomorrow night to decide. Either you choose your family, or you choose him. But you can't have both. After he left, I sat alone in my office, staring at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time since this all began, I forced myself to really look at what I'd become. A liar, a cheater, a woman who'd put her own desires above her children's well-being. But even as the guilt washed over me, I couldn't stop thinking about Travis's hands in mine, his voice telling me I deserved to be happy, his kiss that had made me feel more alive than I had in years. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Travis's number, my finger hovering over the call button. One call could end this nightmare, could save my marriage and protect my children. One call could put my life back together. Instead, I typed, "Can you meet me tomorrow? I need to see you." His response came immediately. "Always, whatever you need, beautiful." I turned off my phone and went to bed, knowing I'd already made my choice. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. I met Travis the next evening at a small park on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes and gossiping neighbors. He was waiting for me on a bench overlooking the lake, and when he saw me approaching, he stood up with that easy smile that had started this whole mess. But when he got a good look at my face, his expression grew concerned. "Isolde, what's wrong? You look like you've been crying." I had been crying on and off all day as the weight of Daniel's ultimatum pressed down on me. "We need to talk." "Okay." He sat back down and patted the bench beside him. "Talk to me." I remained standing, needing the distance to say what I had to say. "Daniel knows about us. He hired a private investigator. He has photos." Travis's face went pale. "Photos of what?" "Everything. Us at the cafe, at the concert, in the parking lot." I took a shaky breath. "He knows we kissed." "Shit." Travis ran a hand through his hair. "Isolde, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to get in trouble. I never meant to cause problems in your marriage." "Didn't you?" The question came out harsher than I'd intended, but suddenly I was angry. At Daniel, at myself, at Travis for making this so complicated. What did you think would happen? Did you think I could just keep sneaking around forever? I hoped that maybe you'd realize you deserved better than a marriage that makes you miserable. And then what? I'd leave my husband and kids and run away with you? Is that what you thought? Travis stood up, reaching for my hands, but I stepped back. I thought you'd choose to be happy. I thought you'd choose yourself for once instead of living your life for everyone else. It's not that simple, Travis. I have responsibilities. I have children who need their mother. They need a mother who's alive, not a zombie going through the motions of living. You don't understand. I understand that you're scared. I understand that choosing yourself feels selfish after years of putting everyone else first. But Isolde, what's the alternative? Going back to a marriage that's already dead? Pretending to be happy for the next 20 years while you die inside? His words hit too close to home, and I felt tears threatening again. Daniel's threatening to divorce me and take the kids if I don't end this. So end it, Travis said simply. If that's what you want, end it. Block my number, forget we ever met, go back to your safe, predictable life. Is that what you want? What I want is for you to be happy. If that means going back to Daniel, then that's what I want. But if it means fighting for something real, something that makes you feel alive, then I want that too. I looked at this man who had turned my world upside down in the span of 2 weeks. This beautiful, passionate, complicated man who saw something in me that I'd thought was gone forever. I can't lose my children, I whispered. You won't. No court is going to take kids away from their mother because she had lunch with a friend. It's more than lunch, and we both know it. Travis stepped closer, and this time I didn't back away. So, what do you want to do? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, and I felt my stomach drop. I have to take this, I said, stepping away from Travis. Hello? Where are you? Daniel's voice was tight with controlled anger. I'm out, running errands. At Riverside Park with your boyfriend? My blood turned to ice. What? I can see you, Isolde. I followed you there. So can we please stop pretending this is about errands? I spun around, scanning the parking lot until I spotted Daniel's sedan parked under a tree about 50 yards away. Even from this distance, I could see him sitting behind the wheel, phone pressed to his ear. Daniel, I can explain. No more explanations, no more lies. Come home now, or I'm calling my lawyer tonight. The line went dead. I turned back to Travis, who had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. He's here, I said numbly. Travis looked toward the parking lot and spotted Daniel's car. Do you want me to talk to him? No, God, no. That would make everything worse. Then what do you want me to do? I looked at Travis, this man who had awakened something in me that I'd thought was dead. This man who made me feel beautiful and interesting and alive. This man who was going to cost me everything I'd built over the past 10 years. I have to go, I said. Isolde, wait. But I was already walking away toward my car, toward Daniel, toward a confrontation I wasn't ready for but couldn't avoid any longer. The drive home was silent and tense, with Daniel following behind me like a police escort. When we pulled into our driveway, I saw Evelyn's car parked on the street. My heart sank even further. Inside, Evelyn was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, her face grave. The kids were nowhere to be seen. I sent Lily and Ben to stay with my sister for the night, Daniel said, answering my unspoken question. They don't need to see this. See what? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. Daniel pulled out the manila folder and spread the photos across the kitchen table. Evelyn's face remained impassive as she looked at the evidence of my betrayal, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. Sit down, Isolde, Daniel said. It wasn't a request. I sat, feeling like a defendant in my own kitchen. I've been to see a lawyer, Daniel continued. I've filed papers for legal separation. If you choose to continue this affair, I'll file for divorce and seek primary custody of the children. You can't do that, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Actually, I can. Adultery is still grounds for divorce in this state, and given your recent behavior, the lying, the sneaking around, the putting your desires above the children's well-being, I have a strong case for being the more stable parent. Evelyn spoke for the first time since I'd entered the room. Isolde, I've known you for 10 years. I've watched you be a wonderful mother to those children. But what you're doing now, this isn't the woman I thought you were. I haven't done anything wrong, I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me. Haven't you? Daniel pulled out a specific photo, me and Travis kissing in the parking lot. What would you call this? I stared at the image, seeing myself as they saw me, not a woman exploring her feelings or trying to find herself, but a cheating wife and mother who had betrayed her family's trust. It was just a kiss, I said weakly. Just a kiss, Daniel repeated. And what comes after just a kiss, Isolde? Just sex? Just moving in together? Just abandoning your children for your new life? I would never abandon my children. Wouldn't you? You've already abandoned your marriage. You've already chosen him over us. How long before you choose him over them too? The accusation hit me like a slap. That's not fair. What's not fair is what you've done to this family. What's not fair is that Lily asked me why Mummy doesn't love Daddy anymore. What's not fair is that Ben has been having nightmares because he can sense that something's wrong. Guilt crashed over me in waves. I had been so focused on my own feelings, my own needs, that I hadn't fully considered what this was doing to my children. I want to make this work, I said desperately. I want to save our marriage. Do you? Daniel's voice was skeptical. Because an hour ago you were in a park with another man, planning your next secret meeting. That's not... I was trying to end it. Were you? Because from where I was sitting, it looked like you were trying to figure out how to keep seeing him without getting caught. He was right, and we all knew it. I had gone to the park intending to end things with Travis, but when I saw him, when I felt that familiar spark, I had wavered. I had been looking for a way to have both, my family and my fantasy. Here's what's going to happen, Daniel said, his voice businesslike. You're going to call Travis right now, in front of us, and tell him it's over. You're going to block his number and delete all contact with him. You're going to quit going out at night, quit lying about where you've been, and focus on rebuilding the trust you've destroyed. And if I do all that, then we'll try counseling. We'll try to save our marriage, for the kids' sake if nothing else. But Isolde, this is your last chance. If I catch you contacting him again, if I find out you've lied to me about anything else, I will divorce you and I will fight for custody, and I will win. I looked at the photos spread across the table, evidence of my betrayal captured in stark black and white. I looked at Evelyn's disappointed face, at Daniel's hurt and anger, at the empty chairs where my children should have been sitting, doing homework or coloring, or just being kids instead of being shipped off to relatives because their mother had blown up their world. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and scrolled to Travis's number. My finger hovered over the call button as I thought about his smile, his music, the way he made me feel alive. But then I thought about Lily's worried face, about Ben's nightmares, about the family I had built and was on the verge of destroying. I pressed call. Travis answered on the second ring. Isolde, are you okay? You left so suddenly. I can't see you anymore, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence on the other end of the line. Travis, did you hear me? I said I can't see you anymore. It's over. Isolde, if this is about your husband threatening you, it's not about threats. It's about my children. It's about my family. I made a mistake and I have to fix it. Another long silence. Then, is this really what you want? I looked across the table at Daniel, at the man I had married and promised to love and honor. He looked older than his 36 years, worn down by weeks of betrayal and humiliation. But he was still here, still willing to fight for our marriage, still willing to give me another chance. Yes, I said, this is what I want. Okay, Travis said quietly. I understand. I hope you find what you're looking for, Isolde. I hope you find a way to be happy. He hung up before I could respond. I immediately blocked his number and deleted his contact information, then handed my phone to Daniel as proof. It's done, I said. Daniel nodded, but his expression remained guarded. We have a long way to go, Isolde. A lot of trust to rebuild. This isn't going to be easy. I know. The counseling starts Monday, and there will be rules. No going out alone at night, no unexplained absences, complete transparency about where you are and who you're with. I understand. Evelyn stood up, gathering her purse. I hope you mean it, Isolde. I hope you're ready to fight for your family, the way Daniel has been fighting for you. After she left, Daniel and I sat in our kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my betrayal. Two people who had loved each other once upon a time and were trying to figure out if they could love each other again. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry, Daniel." "I know," he said. "But sorry isn't enough. You have to prove it. Every day, with every choice you make, you have to prove that you choose us." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I will. I promise I will." But even as I made the promise, I couldn't stop thinking about Travis's voice on the phone, about the life I might have had if I'd been brave enough to choose myself instead of safe enough to choose my family. I had made my choice. Now I had to live with it. But I had no idea that Daniel had already made his choice too, and it wasn't the one I thought. 3 weeks later, as I was finally starting to believe we might actually save our marriage, Daniel handed me a manila envelope over breakfast. "What's this?" I asked. "Divorce papers," he said calmly, sipping his coffee. "I filed them yesterday." The world tilted on its axis. But I thought, "You said if I ended it with Travis." "I said we'd try counseling. We did. It didn't work. But the counselor said we were making progress. The counselor doesn't have to live with a wife who lies as easily as she breathes. The counselor doesn't have to wonder, every time his wife leaves the house, whether she's really going where she says she's going. Daniel, I haven't contacted Travis once since that night. I've done everything you asked." "You've gone through the motions, Isolde, but you haven't been present. Not really. You've been mourning your lost romance, wishing you were somewhere else, with someone else. He was right, and we both knew it. Despite my best efforts, I hadn't been able to stop thinking about Travis, wondering what he was doing, whether he missed me, whether I had made the right choice. I want custody of the children," Daniel continued, "and given your recent behavior, I think any judge will agree that they're better off with the parent who prioritizes their well-being over their own selfish desires. You can't take my children away from me." "Watch me," Daniel said, standing up and straightening his tie. "Oh, and Isolde, I've already moved out. I'm staying at my mother's until the divorce is final. The kids will be staying with me." "What? No, you can't just take them." "Actually, I can. I have temporary custody while we sort this out. You can see them on weekends, supervised visits until the court decides you're stable enough for more." I stared at him in shock, this man I had lived with for 10 years but apparently never really known. "Who are you? This isn't like you, Daniel." "You're right," he said, picking up his briefcase. "The old Daniel would have kept trying to save a marriage that died the moment you kissed another man. The old Daniel would have kept believing your lies and accepting your half-hearted apologies. But that Daniel was a fool." He walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "By the way, I've already spoken to Travis, told him he's welcome to you now. After all, you've both gotten what you wanted." "What do you mean?" Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Check your phone, Isolde. I think you'll find you have a message waiting." After he left, I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. There was indeed a message from Travis. "I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry it had to happen this way, but maybe now we can finally be together for real. Call me when you're ready." I stared at the message, realizing with crystal clarity that I had never wanted Travis. I had wanted the excitement, the validation, the feeling of being desired. But now that it was available to me, now that I was free to pursue it without sneaking around, it felt hollow and meaningless. I had destroyed my marriage for a fantasy, lost my children for a feeling, thrown away everything real and solid and good for something that had never been real at all. I deleted Travis's message without responding and sank to the kitchen floor, finally understanding the true cost of my choices. Daniel had outplayed me completely. He had given me exactly what I thought I wanted, and in doing so, had shown me that I had never really wanted it at all.